Welcome back, friends and listeners, to your favorite true crime podcast, Truth, Lies, and Alibis, by two 911 dispatchers.
Episode 8.
A not-so-religious experience.
In part 2 of our Nxivm Cult discussion, we talk more about the secret group within that trapped women through manipulation, and what would happen when some of those women decided to speak out.
All right, Jess, back at it for part 2 of...
For part 2.
This crazy, insane, dumb-ass cult.
I'm gonna try not to get as mad, but I make no promises.
Get all the mad you want.
No, when I get too mad, I can't explain myself very well, so I just sit here like blah, 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 blah.
So I'm going to recap. Over our last episode, we talked about the beginning of Nxivm. We talked about Keith Raniere and some of his background. And then we went all the way up until the creation of DOS, which is the group within the organization, which is supposed to be about women empowerment, which was actually about creating sex slaves.
Which was actually about having power over women.
Yes. And again, I want to tell you, they use the words master and slave. Not me. They do. That's what they labeled it. So I'm just going to use what they called it within the organization because that's just what they called it. Okay? So again, the secret group was created in 2015 and an estimated 150 women were members of the secret organization. Oh my gosh. Keith originally recruited 8 members, which included Allison Mack, Nikki Klein, Lauren Salzman, the daughter of Nancy Salzman. They were told the organization was women only and that it was formed to empower women and eradicate weaknesses because, according to Nxivm, women are weak and they struggle with weakness.
With these 150 women and it was only the one guy?
Yes. So this is how it came out that Allison Mack and Keith Raniere had basically formed this group together. Allison was what they called the Grand Master, and then above her was Keith Raniere, but he didn't want anyone to know he was involved, kind of thing. He wanted to basically pretend like he wasn't part of this group. If it ever came out, it would fall on her probably. Keith would give his inner circle in DOS tasks such as seduction assignments, in which DOS members told their slaves, again, that's what they call them, to sexually seduce Keith. He told the masters to use demeaning and derogatory language as well as racial slurs to humiliate the slaves, and all Nxivm and DOS members were sleep deprived, but especially DOS members. They had to participate in what they called readiness drills, which basically required them to respond to calls, texts, or messages at any time of day or night within a minute. They were subject to corporal punishment such as holding painful poses, standing barefoot in snow, taking cold showers, whipping each other, and he even floated the idea of putting each other in cages.
How exactly is this empowering women? Like, I know that it's not, but what's your stance on like, oh, well, we're breaking you down so we can build you back? Like, what's your sales pitch here? Like,
are you asking why these women didn't see it the way we see it and stop and say, this is not empowering me.
Why are you making me do this? This isn't making me feel better.
Yeah, I asked the same question. So in the documentary, they go over it they present it as this sorority for women, and it's all about empowering women and all these things and about serving your master and blah, 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 blah. And the women have to ask for what they can eat. They have to ask for what they can do. If they do something they're not supposed to, or they eat too many calories, or they don't answer a text message within a minute, then they have to do this punishment. And they called it penance. Yeah.
Brittany, I'm getting mad again.
I told you I was just going to make you madder. So, quote-unquote slaves basically had to do whatever the masters told them to do, like running errands, cleaning homes, etc. Raniere also had the members participate in extreme dieting and would not have sex with the members until they were at a certain weight, basically starving. This diet made their hair fall out and some of their periods stop. They were also told they had to stay celibate and could not shave or wax their pubic hair. So he had all these rules, and then so there's seduction assignment. The masters, quotes again, God, I hate saying that, would tell them, the members, you have to seduce Keith and he has to get a picture of you naked and send it to me in order to prove that you did it. So in order to be part of this group, you also had to offer up what they called collateral, which is basically blackmail. So some of the women would do like nude photos. Some of them would write statements or videotape statements about something horrible they'd done or something they knew that they couldn't tell their significant
to force
other.
them to stay in the program.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Lauren Solzman would later testify that she had helped Keith write a manifesto for Doss. Some of the excerpts include, "The best slave derives the highest pleasure from being her master's ultimate tool. Your sole highest desire must be to further your master, from whom all good things come and are related. A good slave actively seeks to give her master a competitive advantage over all other people. And it doesn't matter what the command is, it matters that you obey. It doesn't matter that you understand the command, it matters that you obey." Again, I ask, how is this empowering anybody?
Well, it's very clear that if we didn't already think that he bullshitted his way through the 12 pillars, because he did, that's why it's so repetitive and it makes no sense, is because it's all bullshit. But like this manifesto, even the little bit that you read from it, is directly in opposition to what he's saying in his pillars.
Yeah. Former member Sarah Edmondson had come forward to speak about the matter and had made the picture of her brand public. She alleged that Nancy's daughter Lauren had recruited her into the secret organization and had forced her and other women to get the brand one evening in a crazy ritual where the women were forced to be naked in front of one another and one by one were held down and forcefully branded. The brandings were recorded as another form of blackmail, aka collateral. And each branding took about 30 minutes. And so it was like, I want to say 10 people maybe, she said. The way she presented it was, she flew to meet with Lauren, who was pretty high up in the company, right? Because Nancy is her mom. And then it comes out later that Lauren had been having a sexual relationship with Keith for 17 years. So they were involved. So she was also probably brainwashed in a way, but still actively participated in this. She brought Sarah to her house, told Sarah to get undressed, blindfolded her. They drove them naked to Allison Mack's house. And there was all these women just sitting cross-legged on the floor naked in front of each other. And they had took their blindfolds off. And then they were all kind of uncomfortable because it's kind of weird to be in a room full of naked people, like, that you didn't know this was going to happen.
Especially when you don't know why you're there.
Yeah. And Lauren basically was like, get over your limited beliefs. Who cares what your body looks like? It's not weird that we're all here naked together.
I mean, sure, but
but they didn't actively participate in that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, again, the very bottom basis that you're standing on. Sure, like, body positivity, I guess, is the basic thing that you're standing on for this, but then you've taken it and you've mutilated it into something very different.
I mean, I like being naked as much as the next person. I don't know if I'd like to be blindfolded naked and driven somewhere and then placed in a room with a bunch of naked people that I didn't really know.
Especially when you didn't sign up to do anything. You know what I mean? Like, these women were just being like, here, come over to my house.
And it's not like a nudist colony where they're like, let's be free the titties. No.
I love being naked. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another thing is that's not where it ends, right? Like, it doesn't stop pretending at body positivity. It's like, get over your limited beliefs. Doesn't matter what you look like. You could be naked with other people, but then also we're going to brand you and you're going to become a sex slave.
Well, and then it would come out later in the vow, they talk about other experiences that women had, and like some of the women, not the first women who were branded, but some of the women were branded and then chained, and then other women were like forced to perform sex acts on them.
What would happen if they didn't?
They would have to leave this group, which, okay, cool.
Right? Like, that sounds like a great thing.
Run, bitch, run. That's all I have to say.
So were they already part of this subgroup when they were invited over?
Yes. So some of them were in Nxivm, some of them weren't. It starts with, oh, you want to join this group, right? Like, it's great. We're going to empower women, blah, 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 blah. And then they give their blackmail. And then, yes. So, and that's another thing that keeps them there is they've already given this blackmail. So they're like, well, fuck, I don't have a choice. But like, Sarah's married.
How bad is your blackmail? Like, if it's a couple of nude pictures, okay.
Yeah, them. Like you said, porn's free on the internet. You can literally go on OnlyFans and make money off of that. So
yeah, right. I wish like you are worth more than that. Like if that's what you put up as collateral and you're putting yourself through this torture because you don't want a couple of naked images of you. Like I get it. Like I don't want a couple of naked images of me out on the internet. But if the alternative was being branded and chained and being forced to do things I didn't want to do, yeah, leak them. I don't care.
So Sarah, in the vow, she would talk about her collateral was basically she gave some nude photos and then she had Lauren videotape her saying that her husband beat her child, which wasn't true. So they would also like make up things. And then, I mean, if you have it on videotape, you know, who's to say it's true or not true?
Right.
But she's the one who came forward and said, hey, publicly, this group does exist. I had to give blackmail. I had to lie. They branded me. Oh, that's what I was going to say. She's married, right? So here's my thought on this. Some of these members were married. You have to be celibate so you don't get to sleep with your spouse, which, I mean, we've discussed this before. Sex is not the only part of marriage, but I feel like it's an important part of marriage, right? Mm-hmm. You have a brand of some other guy's name, like right by your vagina.
A brand of the 4 elements. So
4 elements, my ass. It's Keith Raniere's name by your vagina. Like in the vow, she goes, after I don't know what she was thinking, but suddenly she's like, oh shit, I have this brand next to my vagina that I really didn't want, of when she realized it was actually his name.
Initials.
She was like, oh my God. So she calls Lauren up because they fucking cults, man. They videotape everything. They tape all the conversations. There's so much video and recorded evidence, right? And she goes, do you ever think Nippy's going to want to go down there again? And that's her husband. That's what they call him. And I was like, maybe you should have thought about that. Like, obviously, maybe this is another part of it, right? I feel like Sarah and her husband, they met within the organization, so they were both vulnerable at that time. But obviously, Sarah was more vulnerable at the time she joined this secret group because maybe their relationship wasn't that great because she didn't think, oh, I have to have sex with my husband. Like, she just joined this group where you have to say that you're going to be celibate and you have to get this brand. Like, how did she think that he would never see it, you know? And from the way Sarah says it, Lauren told her it wasn't a brand. She told her they were going to go get matching tattoos, which, I mean, I have matching tattoos with Nicole. You have matching tattoo with Kylie. Like, people do that all the time. I'm not going to brand myself for anybody. I'm sorry, but no, hard pass. Just the pain and the way it looks. No, thank you. I don't even like when they brand cattle, and I know it's necessary, but I don't like it. Okay. From witnesses and claims that would come forward later, Raniere would convince women to have sex with him by claiming his semen had supernatural qualities and that his energy was channeled through sexual encounters. And basically, sex with him was a religious experience, and you would see this like blue light, and you would just be like so overcome with like knowledge and stuff when you had sex with him.
Sure.
Keith had envisioned DOS to grow to thousands of members with DOS sororities all across the country. He encouraged them to recruit members of power and influence and hoped to get members involved in government so he could spread the ideas he taught and followed throughout the world.
It's so terrifying that this man had as much power as he did.
Yeah, and he had as much influence over like people who seemed to be smart and hardworking.
Right. I mean, we've seen that throughout history, right? Like terrible people with really bad ideas that somehow get outrageous amounts of power and spread their outrageous beliefs.
Hitler?
It's just like, again, like, how did that happen?
I don't know. Also, it's one thing, like, there are some groups where he was really charismatic and like kind and they put on this front, right? Or someone's super good looking and maybe they are good at sex, so they get people to follow them that way. Okay, I don't know anyone like that in a cult. I've never seen that, but maybe that's their idea. This guy is not good looking. He's just some goofy regular guy with a dad bod.
Norm L man.
He's forcing these women to starve themselves while he's like eating Oreos and fucking Cheetos. Like, I don't understand. And one of the people who left would say that after she had sex with him, she did have this like overwhelming feeling. And she even said, I think it was just the power of suggestion. Like him
I'm
just
sure, yeah.
saying that made me feel that way afterwards. And maybe it's also a way of not feeling bad about yourself.
The guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pseudomedication and things like that are proven things that work, right? When you believe something will help you, if you believe you are going to feel, if a doctor tells you, not everybody's susceptible to this, but there are studies that give out pseudomedications. Like that's kind of part of drug testing, right? Is you part of your test group gets the fake pill. And some of those people still feel better or still have affected changes because it's in their mind that they think they're taking medication for this thing. Our brains are incredibly powerful. The effect that we can have on ourselves through that, who knows what these women were actually feeling, because they fully believed that sex with this man was going to be a religious experience, so that their brain generated that for them.
Yeah. Keith also hoped to have a DOS candidate in a high-level political office, of course, so that he could take over the world. I don't know, probably. Yeah. After the publishing of the article, Keith fled to Mexico with certain members in his inner circle. Search warrants were presented for his email accounts in January of 2018, and ultimately a warrant for his arrest was issued in February of 2018. Mexican federal police would locate Keith in a luxury villa outside of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and arrest him and deport him to face charges. Lauren Salzman would later testify that when he was arrested, they were planning a recommitment ceremony to him that included group oral sex as acts of a special gift to Keith to pledge continued dedication. He was arrested for various charges, including sex trafficking, conspiracy for sex trafficking, conspiracy to commit forced labor, sexual exploitation, identity theft, conspiracy to alter records, and racketeering, conspiracy and wire fraud, and at least one woman was coerced into sex with Keith, according to the documents. However, later it would come out that many more were. Keith's trial began on May 7th, 2019, and the jury would find him guilty on all charges after just 5 hours of deliberation. While awaiting sentencing...
I'm not surprised.
Well, he has all this video evidence because he was so full of himself that he taped everything.
And the jury members aren't part of his crazy cult, so of course they're going to respond like we are.
And he had all the collateral on his computer, too. So, while awaiting sentencing, his attorney filed 2 motions for a new trial. They were both denied. Surprise, surprise. Also, on a side note, Claire Bronfman paid for his lawyer. So she lost all these millions of dollars and she's still, paying for him. COVID delayed his sentencing, and while awaiting sentencing, he was held in a metropolitan detention complex. He began communicating with a supporter who recorded their conversations and started a podcast titled Raniere Speaks. The supporter was then forbidden from contacting Keith. Other supporters began dancing near the jail with signs in supporting Keith, and Keith then instructed them to dance erotically outside where he could see them, and he was moved from that location.
This man is so gross.
Everyone, I wish you could see Jess's face. Yeah.
Stop
It just gets worse and worse,
making your
right?
outrageous libido everybody else's problem.
On October 27th, 2020, federal judge Nicholas Garofis, I think that's how you say it, sentenced Keith to 120 years in prison and fined him $1.75 million. He was then transferred to another federal, that's what I said, to another federal prison and ultimately transferred to the United States Penitentiary Facility in Tucson, Arizona, which, did you know this? It is designed for sex offenders in a maximum security level compound. Gross, right? Later in the final hearing, the judge ruled he must return all collateral to the members of DOS. His 21 victims should receive $3.46 million, which, where is that money going to come from now that he's sitting in prison?
Yeah.
Yeah. And his lawyer appealed this decision again. It was ultimately denied.
Do you know what grounds they tried to appeal it on?
One of them was perjury, and they just made up bullshit stuff.
Grasping, yeah.
Yeah. So some other interesting details that I found in my research. In 2018, Nxivm had been involved in a documentary claiming they had cured Tourette's, and the film's executive director was Claire Bronfman. The film is no longer available to the public.
Because, spoiler alert, they did not cure Tourette's.
There's no cure for Tourette's. And the people they had in the film won't talk about it. And they said that they used ESP to cure Tourette's.
Every time you say that, I know what it stands for now. But every time you say that, I just think of the extrasensory perception. And I'm just like, yes, I used my ESP to fix your Tourette's.
Another study that the cult was involved in was called the Human Subject Experimentation, where Nxivm showed disturbing videos and photos of people being murdered and other acts. Their brainwaves, psychological activities, facial and auditory responses were recorded through video and galvanic skin response, as well as electroencephalography, which is the measurement of electrical activity in different parts of the brain and the recording of such activity as a visual trace on paper or on a screen. And they were like recorded all of this.
What was the purpose of that? You don't know?
It didn't go anywhere.
I thought I missed.
Nope.
I missed that part. But
they just were like, hey, let's do this study where we show people murder pictures and just measure their brainwaves.
And just see how they respond.
Just like that crazy weird shit that they were like, you're so happy. Now you're dying.
Now you're angry.
In 2002, Kristen Marie Snyder, a 35-year-old environmental consultant, had paid $7,000 for a 16-day intensive in Anchorage, Alaska, hosted by Nancy. In January of 2003, she traveled to New York to visit Keith and other members, and she signed up for a second intensive while there, and I think that occurred in March. On the 10th day of this intensive, Snyder claimed she was pregnant with Keith's baby. She was last seen leaving this intensive, and 2 days later in Seward, Alaska, her vehicle was found empty with a note that read, and this is a quote, "I attended a course called Executive Success Programs."
It could have been called Success.
It could have. It should have. Based out of Anchorage, Alaska, and Albany, New York. I was brainwashed and the emotional center of the brain was killed and turned off. I still have feelings in my external organs, but my internal organs are rotting. I am sorry, life. I didn't know I was already dead. May we persist into the future. No need to search for my body. At this time, Raniere had supposedly claimed to be celibate, so he was like, oh, I didn't get her pregnant. No. Even though later on it would also come out that he had gotten more people pregnant. So
I'm sure.
Her spouse would tell investigators that she had taken these classes and had begun to change, not sleeping and feeling very depressed, and investigators would say that she had driven her vehicle to Resurrection Bay so she could intentionally capsize her kayak and commit suicide, which I'm like, that seems like a weird way to do it, but okay. Her body was never found. Keith would tell Nxivm members her death was a hoax and that she was living happily in Mexico.
Oh my God.
In May of 2009, the Dalai Lama traveled to Albany to speak about Nxivm. They had been eager to distance themselves from the cult allegations and spent $2 million to visit the Dalai Lama and convince him to endorse Nxivm. Because apparently he was scheduled to come, and then all this stuff came out about them being a cult, and he was like, oh, I need to do more research.
He's like, actually, never mind.
Yeah. So then they went to visit him and were like, oh, no, we're not a cult. Please endorse us. And he came and endorsed Nxivm. He also wrote a foreword in a book that Keith Raniere co-authored. That aged well, right? It was Bonnie, who I told you about, who was in Star Wars, and this is like stuff I learned in the documentaries, who finally left Nxivm. That eventually inspired her husband Mark Vicente to leave the program, and Sarah Edmondson to leave and come forward to the media with the allegations of DOS. Bonnie left after noticing that some of the women within the community were starving themselves and acting odd, and eventually making the connection that they were involved in a cult. In the documentary...
So she wasn't in the subgroup?
No, she was not. She was just in Nxivm. But she was putting so much time into this. Like, she was part of this other subgroup that did yoga, so she had to go and teach yoga class, and she had to go do her ESPs, and she had to go do this and that and all these things. She wasn't sleeping. Yeah. She wasn't really eating. She talked to someone about it, and they were like, this sounds like a cult, basically. And she kind of woke up and was like, oh my God, this is a cult.
Yeah, it does.
I am not safe. And decided to leave. This also led to the documentary series titled The Vow on HBO, which goes over how Nxivm gained control over so many people and unmasks all the issues within the cult. Stars would ultimately come out with the series Seduced, where India Oxenberg would talk about her experiences within DOS and her sexual relationship with Keith Raniere. Mark didn't leave right when Bonnie did, and he even was like, you're crazy. I have lots of problems with Mark, right? Like, yes, he helped Sarah eventually leave, but he brought her into it. And then Sarah would bring in hundreds of people, and so would Mark. And then he brought Bonnie in, and they got married, and he didn't support her. He didn't listen to her. He was like, there's conversations, and he's like, I don't know if you're right about that. I don't know if you're seeing that right. Like, basically trying to tell her she was wrong.
This cult is helping him disregard a woman's opinion, so...
Well, he was one of the co-founders of Society of Protectors, where they basically talked badly about women and talked about raping women. And in the documentary, it goes over how Catherine Oxenberg was at their house one time visiting, and she saw what she thought was like a dog bed on the floor. They didn't have a dog. Apparently, Bonnie had done something that upset Mark, so her penance was to sleep on the floor for a week. They're still married. Yeah. Also, Mark was super dedicated to Keith. Like, he had been in the program for 12 years, I think, maybe longer. And he talked to him every day. He did all of his videoing. Most of the videos you see are from Mark. He was like a really dedicated follower. He knew about the allegations of underage girls, but he believed Keith. He said Keith had a reason for everything. And I'm like, there's no fucking reason that's good enough that you'd be like, oh, okay. Like,
right.
This is why I have a problem with him. I am sorry you got involved in this cult, but you actively participated in it and you made it worse.
Yeah.
And on top of that, this was not the first cult that Mark was involved in. He was also involved in Ramtha's School of Light, a cult that was established in 1988. According to Wikipedia, Ramtha's School of Enlightenment is an American New Age spiritual sect near the rural town of Yelm, Washington. The school was established in 1988 by J.Z. Knight, who claimed to channel a 35,000-year-old being called Ramtha, the Enlightened One. The school's teachings are based on channeling sessions. This cult also participated in some very questionable activities such as brainwashing and mind control, as well as using intimidation and fear techniques to keep students in the school, and so-called days to come, which were prophesized earth changes and instructions. Like, Ramtha instructed her followers to leave cities to find places in the country to grow their own food and become sovereign or self-sufficient. She also instructed them to build underground shelters to protect themselves and their family. Various instances with the school's grounds had been characterized as controversial. Glenn Cunningham described one evening when Knight suggested that all the students should stay there overnight because she said it would be good for the energy. And as a result, there was so this was before the great arena, which they were building, which had been a horse stable, had been floored, and as a result, there would be lots of dust in the air. According to Cunningham, there was a very old woman among the students who begged him not to go, said she didn't want to go, but she was forced to go, and the woman would eventually die of pneumonia due to the infection she got while there. Another incident, which is mentioned by Cunningham again, is the practice of running blindfolded in large fenced field, and they specifically mention a particular occasion around 1990 when about 1,000 blindfolded students were directed to split up and run across the field with their hands in the consciousness and energy position in front of them to help the students overcome their fears. And many people crashed into each other and there were injuries. A customer of his ended up with a deeply bruised shoulder and a big lump on their forehead. Aside from minor injuries, a few people were treated in the hospital. And in May 2002, near Spinello, a small city believed to be blessed by night, an Italian couple allegedly committed suicide in their self-built bunker. The school noted that the couple had not attended any events in 10 years and questioned the connection since they weren't actively involved. But all of it's just kind of weird. So he went from this one weird cult. So this is my thing and why I mentioned all those things. He eventually got out of that cult. How the fuck did he not see the red flags in this one?
Well, I was kind of thinking that too, is that maybe he liked it. He wanted to be
involved in something like that.
He wanted to be involved with a very charismatic figure who had power over people that, like, maybe he didn't want to make his own choices. And so he's like, well, like, he was most comfortable being told what to do and, like, what to think.
Yeah.
Who knows?
That was his comfort zone. He needs to go to therapy. Lots of therapy. When members of Nxivm tried to leave throughout the years, they were hit with various lawsuits and court proceedings in an attempt to keep them from speaking badly about the cult. The cult had unlimited funding due to the Nxivm sisters, which would not only keep the previous members busy in court, but drown them in legal bills.
Right.
Keith, like I mentioned before, lived in a home with multiple women who he had been sexually involved with, and some of the women would later come forward saying stuff like he kind of controlled them and like made them feel worse about themselves as a way to control. And eventually there was this lady named Barbara Pouchet who had been with Keith for a while and thought she was his only girlfriend and really supported him. And this would later find out he was involved with all these other women, and so she tried to just leave him but still be in the Nxivm because it was her income too. And he basically made her out to be crazy and like said all these things about her, and eventually she left. She brought it to the board, who had to members, that the board was made up of all women who were sleeping with him. And so a bunch of members left at that time, and they tried to sue Nxivm. And that's when Nxivm hit them with a bunch of lawsuits that kept them in court. And these women had like hundreds of thousands of dollars in court debt, so they couldn't even support themselves. There are tons of videos taken by members that document the cult's weird classes, get-togethers, and trainings. In some of them, Keith can be seen talking about how great he is and about how he's so special because he can carry on all these relationships with women for such a long period of time. And then there's others.
Yeah, what a gift.
Yeah, from blackmailing them and, causing them to hate themselves. And in some of them, obviously, he's talking about raping people. Within this videos of the cult, there's also videos of this stuff this week that they call V Week, which is Vanguard Week, where they would celebrate Keith's birthday. And it's described as like the best adult summer camp ever, but like literally it's a bunch of weirdos. There's videos of one where the girls were wearing like fake boobs, like plastic boobs, and then guys were wearing like dildos. And then Keith would take the girls to this light, and he would shine it up their dress. It was very weird. It was all sexually based. It's so bizarre. Yeah. All sexually based, and that's yet another red flag. How did that not connect? He also would kiss everybody on the lips. Yeah, which is like, ew, gross. So during the criminal case, prosecutors also alleged that in 2002, Keith gained control over a Nxivm family from Monterrey, Mexico. In the documentary, it goes over, like, in Mexico, there was some pretty high up people in the government who were involved in Nxivm. The family moved to Albany, where the 3 daughters were sexually groomed by Raniere when they were teenagers. The girls would eventually become sexually involved with Raniere, and the eldest daughter would have his second biological child. The middle child was groomed as a minor and supposedly began a sexual relationship with Keith just days after she turned 18. He also began sexually abusing the youngest daughter in 2005 when she was just 15 years old. Prosecutors also alleged that he had gotten each of the sisters pregnant multiple times and made them get abortions. It gets worse, Jessica. The middle daughter, Daniela, would testify in 2019 and told the court Keith had told the sisters he had mystical powers that could heal through sex. He made each of the sisters promise he would be their only romantic partner and told them that any infidelity would physically harm him. Daniela also told the court that Keith had tried to get her to perform sexual acts on her own sister. She told prosecutors that in 2010, she was basically a prisoner in her house for 2 years. She was kept away from her family and kept in what they called solitary confinement because Keith had convinced them that she had stolen money from the family. She said what had really happened is she had told Keith shortly before that she was romantically interested in another man. Keith told her that she had committed an ethical breach and assigned Lauren Salzman, the daughter of Nancy, to help her learn from her mistakes. She was kept in a room with blacked out windows and had a mattress on the floor and pen and paper. She was only allowed to speak to Lauren, and in 2012, when she tried to commit suicide, she finally escaped her captivity.
She was in that room for 2 years?
2 years. She would attempt to confront Keith at a volleyball game, because it's where everyone is.
Because everybody knows where he's going to be on a certain night.
He ran and hid from her, and she was escorted out of the Nxivm community and left at the Mexico border with less than $80 and nothing else, like none of her items. So my question is, what the fuck? Where was her family? Why did they let this happen? I don't understand. Camilla, the youngest daughter, was also brought up in trial. Keith had various sexually explicit photos of her, and there were also many messages found between the two, and Keith had called her his sex slave and told her to find him more sex slaves, but he wanted women who were shorter than him, younger than him, and virgins. She would not testify at trial, but made a victim impact statement and told the court that she had a sexual relationship with Keith for 12 years that started at age 15. She said that the abuse she suffered led to eating disorders, attempted suicides, and self-harming.
God, he hurt so many people.
Into January 2020, Raniere and other members of the cult were named as defendants in a civil lawsuit that was filed by 80 former Nxivm members. It details allegations of fraud and abuse and states Nxivm was a pyramid scheme that exploited its recruits. This is an ongoing lawsuit as of November 2022, so last year. In the vow, they also talk about Keith's first child. So he was romantically involved with all these women, sexually involved with all of them. He got this woman pregnant who was part of the group, and basically she had to pretend like the baby wasn't his because he was celibate, and eventually she would leave. She would flee and take the baby with her because she was scared that Keith was experimenting on him, which I don't know what that means, maybe brainwashing him. But she was just scared for the kid's safety, which I'm like, yeah, I would be too. So, in July of 2018, Nxivm financial backer, Seagram heiress Claire Brofman is indicted on several charges, including racketeering, identity theft, and money laundering, along with Keith Raniere, Allison Mack, Nancy and Lauren Salzman, and Kathy Russell, Nxivm's bookkeeper. She pleads guilty to conspiracy to conceal and harbor illegal aliens for financial gain, as well as fraudulent use of identification. And because of her plea deal, she got 21 to 27 months instead of 25 years in prison.
That's quite the plea. Are you kidding me?
Nope. Allison Mack from Smallville was also arrested and charged in 2018 with crimes including racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, forced labor conspiracy. She pleaded guilty in order to avoid trial. And if she had gone to trial, she would have got 14 to 17 years. But because she pled guilty, she got 3 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a $20,000 fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
That kind of feels like nothing.
Nope. Nancy Salzman was also arrested, and she pled guilty to racketeering conspiracy, and she was the first out of Keith's co-defendants to accept a plea deal and testify against him. She faced a sentence of 33 to 41 months and a maximum fine of $250,000, and she was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Salzman is currently serving her sentence at the Federal Correction Institute, Hazleton in West Virginia, and is expected to be released in December of 2024. She pled guilty to one thing, and she got like the same amount of time basically as Allison Mack, who branded people. But okay. Lauren Salzman, who is the daughter of Nancy Salzman, who was also a first-line DOS member and brought all these people in, was arrested on racketeering conspiracy charges, including trafficking, forced labor, and extortion in 2018. And she pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy and racketeering charges, so she could also avoid trial. She was also a co-defendant who testified against him in court, and she detailed everything. And on July 28th, 2021, Lauren received a sentence of no jail time. So she didn't even have to go to jail, even though she branded people. Again, that is all the people who were arrested and charged and either went to prison, didn't go to prison. I mean, at least he got 120 years in prison, so he's going to serve his whole life there. But there's still... Recently, the second season of The Vow came out, which I haven't even been able to dive into, so we'll probably do an update later. And it has his supporters on there. And Nancy Salzman comes forward to speak about how she supports it still.
Is that second season within like the past year or so?
Yeah, it came out this year. Well, 2022, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, I remember hearing about the cult just over like the past year or so. So I was going to ask like what recent thing had happened with it, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
And is Allison Mack still in jail, or she served her 3 years?
So she was sentenced in June 2021 of 3 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release. So she could be out now, actually, because it goes from the time she was arrested. As of February 2023, she's imprisoned in Federal Correction Institute. So she's still in prison. But Lauren, is out walking around, probably still supporting Keith Raniere. There's still supporters who, call themselves... It's like the Manson girls. They're,
right.
Keith's girls and probably dance erotically and do all the weird shit that he wanted them to do. Nxivm's still, a thing, too, I think. So...
it just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't... You have the hope that people will think rationally about things, but they clearly don't.
People are fucking weird. And some of them, no offense, are really dumb.
Just so susceptible.
I don't understand why you would think anything that he was teaching was okay. I don't understand why you would think underage girls is okay. I don't understand why you think rape is okay. I don't understand why you think calling women naggy and stupid and all the things is okay. I don't understand any of it. I also don't understand why you would spend $7,500 to watch some weird lady tell you about how you're a whack-a-mole, okay? And how to be happy. I don't get it. Do I get wanting to be happy? Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
I could get behind that.
It's an interesting phenomenon where people are like, yeah, I want to go and I want to be happy. And then it takes this, sharp left turn into these, extremist ideas. And they're still like, yeah, okay.
At some point you had to have been like, oh, this is bad. I probably shouldn't do this. I probably shouldn't be here. But you didn't listen to that? Anyway, Jess, what's the number one thing you learned from these last 2 episodes?
The number one thing I learned is an observation that people, as a general statement, people collectively are not smart.
Agreed.
We, as a species, we could do better.
We could do so much better.
There's a lot Also, like, value yourself in the fact that, like, don't do things you don't want to do, even if somebody has a blackmail.
Maybe have your own 12 pillars to stand on, and one of them being don't give anyone anything called collateral or blackmail. And if I don't want naked pictures of myself on the internet, don't send naked pictures to anybody, because that shit'll get leaked.
If you sign up for a class that is supposed to be empowering and all you're getting out of it is humiliation and degradation and servitude, get out of the class.
Yeah,
You're not being empowered.
Don't take that class. Also, don't pay $7,500. Just don't do any of the things that these people did.
If you have
Nothing.
$7,000 to burn, I will gladly talk to you for hours about my own philosophies and what I think. And
none of it will be you're a horrible person because you're a woman.
Yeah, I'll explain how lots of things don't make sense and how people should think more rationally. And I won't charge you $7,000. I'll only charge you $3,500. It's a steal.
Thank you for listening. Additional information for each case can be found on our website, truthliesandalibis.buzzsprout.com. New episodes will be uploaded every Monday. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Truth Lies and Alibis.